Hey guys, so standard format for the video. I'm going to give an introduction, then I'll give the dream, then I'll give an interpretation, and then discussion. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to give you like 5 to 20 seconds of geographical background before we get into it. Here we go. Alright, so I'm in North Island hill country, southern North Island here, and this is a native forest remnant. These are old, very tall, coniferous species of New Zealand tree. You can see some epiphytes here. This is kind of my jam, this landscape, and my family has actually been in farming in these landscapes for almost 200 years, so I feel pretty happy and at home here. Alright, that's it. I mean, just kind of, I won't say exactly where I am. But yeah, the New Zealand countryside is lovely, and the cities are kind of hellish, but man, if you can find some small towns and everyone's just so sweet. It's like paradise in a demon's realm. There is still, you can still find beautiful people in the beauty of New Zealand's nature and New Zealand society if you look. There's not many spots left now. There's just a few bright spots, but it is possible. So that's been a nice discovery this trip. Here we go. All right, into it. So this is a dream that I had within the last 10 days. I think it was on, it was the evening of the 16th of July 2024 through to the morning of the 17th of July 2024. There were two main parts to the dream. The second part was more about Ecuador and, how do I put it? The content of that part of the dream is kind of a separate topic, so I'm going to leave it for a separate video despite it all being one dream, and I'll explain it when I do that video and refer back to this video that, you know, I'll basically explain that it's two videos for one dream. But I'll do, to be clear, I'll do the second part of the dream, which is a separate topic, primary topic, which is primarily Ecuador as a place of refuge and safety from World War III. I'll do that later. But the first part of the dream was more about New Zealand and, by extension, other Anglo-Saxon countries and the fate we will face when we are invaded, bombed, nuked, defeated, then conquered and occupied. And that's going to happen around 2029, 2030, based on the dreams I've had. I should point out there are other people who have been given roughly those dates. Danny from the channel Christian Communities was actually given a dream, and he dated it and he worked it out, and it was roughly around 2029 when he was being shown the UK and getting chills now. That's confirmation. Getting invaded. I'll see if I can find that and I'll put it in the description box below. So to be clear, you don't ever get given exact dates. Like you don't never get given an exact year or a month, but you'll be given rough ranges. So yeah, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's pretty grim. The subject matter of this dream. In terms of Christian values, it's important to remember that we should never move into the spirit of fear, and we should stay in faith. And, God will always protect us and provide for us. And that's not just a belief. Once you begin to really get into it, you discover that this is literally true. And then, as I like to say, belief is the trainer wheels to knowing. So belief is just, the trainer wheels on your bicycle when you're 4 years old. And then once you get confident enough, you take the trainer wheels off, because you don't need to believe it anymore, because you just know that's how it works. You've seen it enough times. So don't move it. I'm not trying to scare people. And the hope, faith and hope, the hope that I'll remind people of from the Anglo-Saxon country perspective. I've expanded the scope of this channel now so that it's more global. I just want to warn, to be honest, it's aimed at warning everyone in any country in the world on both sides of the war, Axis and our allies. But naturally, there are going to be more videos about countries that, I have more of a connection to, such as New Zealand and Spain. But from an Anglo-Saxon perspective, okay, so what I'm about to get into is really, really dark. So just remember, from our perspective, we do win the war in the end, okay? That said, England might not survive it. Israel is definitely not going to survive it. I'll get into that in a separate video. I didn't actually realize this. England's karma is so heavy. England might not survive the war. I think Scotland and Ireland will get completely annihilated like the rest of us, but the US, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, you know, Scotland, Ireland, South Africa, Wales, you know, that's the kind of the, if you include Ireland and South Africa, that's the kind of expanded Anglosphere, but the core of it is the US, UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand in descending order of population. Now looks actually like, based on my research, England may not survive it. England might be completely wiped out. Their karma is just so heavy. And I recently found out that it's been conservatively estimated that the British Empire killed 165 million people in India. I mean, that's more people than died in World War II. I didn't realize it was so high. I mean, their karma is just beyond belief. So I'll talk about that in a separate video in the future though. But so yeah, like I said, England's a special case. It's going to be, we might be looking at complete extinction. It'll be like East Prussia. Like England will be, I mean, you got to go basically. I mean, yeah. If you want to survive, and if you want to fight, just yeah, it's fine, but you'll die. You'll die fighting, and it will be better to die fighting and get taken prisoner. And that relates to the content of the stream. All right, that was the lead up, the warm up. So in the dream, I am. Because I got shown it's kind of going to be similar for people in New Zealand. Like I got shown, yeah, you can stay and fight, but you're going to die. To repeat, you can choose to stay and fight in New Zealand, but you will die. You will die, you will die. You'll die in combat, and you've got no chance. You've got no, I won't swear, try to keep low vibrational language to a minimum. So I'll say freaking instead of, yeah, you've got no freaking chance, okay? So you'll be able to, just, if you choose to stay and fight in New Zealand and you're hearing this, just know we're going to lose. Know we're going to get crushed. But, the crucial point, we may be able to inflict colossal losses as we go down. So just, we're going to lose. We've got no, I'm sorry, there's no way to sugarcoat it. We've got no chance of winning. But that doesn't mean we can't kill a huge number of them and take them down with us as we go. Yeah, I'll get into that a bit more in this later in this video. So in the video, in the dream, it started off and I was standing at a bay. It's called Camp Bay because people used to camp there a lot, I guess, back in the day. And it's located south of Eastbourne, which is on the east side of Wellington Harbour. Wellington City being the capital of New Zealand. It's where I grew up. I grew up in Eastbourne. I lived there from 89 to 2009. So there's a road sealed road that goes south of Eastbourne and it stops at a place called Burdan's Gate. Beyond Burdan's Gate is what we call in New Zealand a metal road, which is basically gravel. And then you have to have special access to get through the gate, and it's only sort of tour buses and things that go down to. There's a tourist lodge down there by the lighthouses called Pencarrow Lodge that takes tourists down there sometimes. But so there's not really any vehicle traffic on that road, but lots of people walk down it and bike down it just for recreation. And it leads down to two lighthouses on the east side of the entrance to Wellington Harbour at Pencarrow Heads, called the Pencarrow Lighthouses. I think they're actually the oldest lighthouses in New Zealand, if I recall correctly. But you know, it's a beautiful area. And it's about 2 kilometres south of Burdan's Gate. It's probably more like 1.5 kilometres south. You reach this nice little pleasant bay. It's a really beautiful coastline, very peaceful. And yeah, called Camp Bay, and there's a little bit of flat land behind the road. And in the dream, I was standing at the bottom, on this flat land behind the road, and then above you, if you're there, I'll put a Google Maps pin in the description box below so you can see where I'm talking about. I'll put pins to where Burdan's Gate is located and the lighthouses are located too, so you can get a sense of the overall kind of geographical context of the area. Yeah, and we were looking up we were standing on this flat piece of land behind the metal road in Camp Bay, looking up at the hills behind us, and there was kind of valleys as it moves up to a ridge line high above. And I was standing, it was me, the age I am now, and I was with an Ecuadorian friend, but he was quite young. He was only like, he was about 19. He was a lot younger than me. And there was a feeling of foreboding. We were standing there, and there were 3 other New Zealanders with us. And they were adult men. So there were 5 of us in total. And we knew there was war coming, and there was an enemy coming. We knew that. And there was some kind of enemy high up in the hills, and they were part of the invasion force. Now, I'm getting chills all over my body right now. To my right, there was an artillery piece. It was a howitzer. Now, I've seen recently in the town that I'm currently house sitting in, it was the same kind of howitzer. I think that's why God used this piece of symbolism in the dream, because I'd recently seen this weapon. But it literally dates from World War I, and it's made by Skoda. I mean, they now make cars. I forget which European country that company is from, but it was actually made by Skoda back in the day. It said that on the plaque, and it was talking about how they now make cars. But there's this World War I, New Zealand Army World War I howitzer in a little country museum in the town I'm staying in. And I saw in the dream this exact same artillery piece, and it was standing there waiting to be fired. And it represented, like, we were going on the attack, and if we wanted to, we could go and attack this enemy that was up in the hills. So there's 3 other New Zealand adult men with us. They picked up weapons. That wasn't too detailed, but I knew, and then I could just see them picking up some kind of weapon. They were just rifles. That wasn't too important. So the symbolism was simple. And then they moved together, sort of, to be honest, with kind of confidence. They didn't really, it seemed like they didn't understand what they were getting into. That's part of the message of the dream. And they moved up the valley out of sight. But myself and my Ecuadorian friend, so we had our hearts open. And that's really important, but there's been an over-feminization of spirituality in the West in recent years. So people think that spirituality is all peace and love, but they ignore the mass. That's the feminine, and it's important, we do need that. But that's the feminine side of it. And but dude, it's not all Bambi and hot chocolate, whipped cream and rainbows. There are vicious, there's evil is real. There are sick, twisted monsters and truly evil people in this world. And it's more the feminine aspect, because, well, women, that, not exclusively, but that tends to be the more the female domain. Let's just be real. That's why most warriors are men. I don't care about all the toxic, social Marxist, toxic form of third wave feminism, mind control bullshit. Like, women are physically weaker than men. Yeah, like, we're stronger physically. Most of us are better, most, not all, are better equipped mentally to handle stress. And you can, if you don't believe me as a woman, go start a fight with any guy, and you're going to get physically destroyed, okay? So there's all this bullshit and nonsense that's being pushed by this cultural Marxist toxic third wave feminism agenda, which, by the way, is being covertly pushed by Russia and China in our countries to weaken our societies, destroy the family, and divide and conquer us, to weaken us before they culturally, to win a cultural war before they attack us economically, and win an economic war before they finally attack us and beat us in a real war. So why am I saying all this? Well, in addition to kind of confusing everyone, that there's been a deliberate effort to cut out the divine masculine in our countries. So any form of violence is considered evil, but it's okay. You're not allowed to defend yourself. Guns are bad. Violence is bad, even if it's self-defense, apparently. And no one's allowed to have guns, but the politicians are allowed to have guns, and they're allowed to, but you're not. And violence is bad, except when they're doing it. So this is there is a concerted effort to strip and to demonize healthy masculinity too, which is completely ironic because the healthy masculine is the only reason, like, healthy, happy feminine woman can't exist without healthy, happy, functioning, strong men. Because they just get destroyed by predators. Like, healthy, good, strong men protect women. Like, women can't actually be in their feminine unless they've got men who are good men who are capable of violence around them. So part of having your heart open is peace and love, but part of it is also passion and righteous fury and anger, which will motivate you to beat the shit out of people if they step over a line and do evil things. And a lot of people don't get this because it's like, oh, violence is bad. No. Yes, violence is bad, but self-defense isn't. And self-defense is important. So yeah, we need the divine masculine. And part of having your heart open is, love and empathy and kindness. But the other part is righteous fury and indignation, passion, and, the ability to fight. But I like to say, you should have empathy should always be turned on, but you should have a compassion switch. So you can turn compassion off when necessary, and you need to do that when you fight. So you can really get into it. The intelligence of the heart is very interesting, and it's like its own computer. We have different energy centers in our body, and I've been given dreams where God's explained this to me. And each is like a different form of intelligence, its own separate mind, and they're each like little brains, and they each have a different form of intelligence. And the intelligence of the heart is very advanced, and there are many facets to it. But it's what gives us our sixth sense. So, for example, I've noticed a lot of Americans have, people around there's people in countries all around the world that have their hearts open. I've noticed parts of the US, like a lot of people have their hearts open, and you'll just casually hear Americans talking about psychic abilities and comments on YouTube, like, oh, I could feel the energy of this place, I needed to leave, I could feel it was wrong. So that's the sixth sense, and that comes from having your heart open, because our heart has an electromagnetic charge, and so we can feel energies when we've got our heart open. So it's good for people to be aware of this. This is an important survival skill. Like I said, like and it helps you if you're in combat. It's not, like I said, it's not just about peace and love. It'll help you to survive dangerous situations. It'll also help you to win fights. But when you keep your heart open, the thing is, when your heart is open, empathy is on 100% by default, and so it's a safety mechanism. It stops you from turning brutal. It's like the difference between, you'll still shoot someone in the head if you have to defend yourself, but you won't become a war criminal and take them out back to, like a woodshed and spend 10 hours cutting them up, which is what people can do when they shut their hearts down. So the heart, I had an Australian friend who talked to me, and it was in Australia some years ago. It's like a safety valve. It stops you from going too far and like from becoming psychopathic, basically. But you can still fight when you've got your heart open, and it actually makes you a more effective fighter. In fact, when you're in combat situations, it's best to open your heart up more, because it activates these six senses and you can feel energy, and that's a huge advantage. You can literally feel the intentions and kind of what's about to happen of the other person. You can feel the energy, the environment around you. So that's what was happening in this dream. So me and this Ecuadorian friend of mine, we had our hearts open. The three Kiwis, they didn't. So they went confidently up this valley. Ooh, getting chills now. But me and the Ecuadorian guy, we could just feel it. We were talking to each other. I spoke to him in Spanish, and he said something back to me in Spanish. We basically said, "Oh, we're not going. They're all going to die. They don't understand it, but there's no hope. They're all going to die." And then I looked at the artillery piece to my right, and I was thinking too, like, from my perspective, it is possible that I will be involved in the war. If God directs me to do that, I will. But if I ever get involved in the war, it will be in a different capacity. I'm not going to be a frontline soldier. And like, yeah, I was in the dream. I didn't know how to use this artillery piece. So it's like, yeah, I'd be dying. I'd die for certain. And then I wouldn't really be much good because it's not my role. But one of the reasons I talked about, yeah, it's important for people to understand this intelligence of the heart. It's a little bit of a side note to the video, but it has wider relevance to this audience in terms of the purpose of the channel. If you become familiar and work with the intelligence of the heart and you start using your sixth sense more, it's going to help you survive the next 30 years, because it did in the dream. Like, all those 3 guys, they went up the hill and they all died. There was a battle later and like they all died. So 60% of us, 3 out of 5 in the group, went up the hill and they went straight to their deaths. Me and the Ecuadorian guy, like, we knew, because we had our sixth sense, because we had our hearts open, not to go. So it's like, okay, that's certain death, so we're not going to do that. We're going to frickin' Scarpa, get out of here. And I've recently been reading The Lord of the Rings, and I've been rereading it for the 4th time. I'm a total Tolkien nerd. But it's interesting, I've been reading it very slowly. And it's funny because, man, the guy was at least 3 generations ahead of his time. So I had my grandfather on my paternal line, my father's father, for example. He was the same. He was 75 years ahead of his time. In the 50s, he was learning to speak Māori at a time when they still wouldn't let Māori kids speak Māori in schools. They were still doing cultural genocide here in New Zealand, and Māori were, there's still discrimination at a systemic level towards Māori, but there's a lot less, and it's being talked about widely, and there's more of a renaissance of Māori culture. But back then it was still full-on state institutional racism. There still is some of that left now, but it's steadily being addressed and all of it slowly being removed. Back then it was still like total repression of indigenous culture. Yeah, they literally wouldn't let them speak their own language. And then we've got my grandfather, who's, really wealthy. He never had to work, and old money, and he had lots of empathy towards Māori and interest in Māori culture. And he learnt Māori as a wealthy New Zealand European and an artist. Like, that was unheard of, literally unheard of at the time. So he was 70, and when he died, he set up scholarships for local Māori in Hawke's Bay. He was literally, that would be kind of, there was no one doing that at the time. You'd be like an alien back then in the 50s if you're doing that. And yeah, in the same way, The Lord of the Rings was released around the same time in the 50s. There's a couple of ways you can see that Tolkien was about 75 years ahead of his time. Interestingly, if you look at the character arc of Éowyn, the princess, the daughter of King Theoden from Rohan, you see this in the movies too. There's this whole feminist narrative where she's talking about how she doesn't want to just be, in the background and be like a kind of a housemaid. She wants to be a warrior, and she wants to fight with the men. And then she goes out and she does it, and she has this pivotal role in the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, and it makes a big difference on the battlefield. She actually fights. That's a healthy, positive feminist narrative, not a toxic one. It's saying like women should have the same rights as men, and they shouldn't just be relegated to some position because of societal expectations where they, they should be able to do whatever they want. They should have equal rights, and that's amazing. That's like that. Okay, not by today's standards, that's normal. But that's amazing that Tolkien put that in this fantasy narrative back in the 50s. I think a lot of people fail to appreciate that, because now it seems normal. But you have to remember, this was written in the 1950s. This guy, again, was 75 years ahead of his time. Another area he was 75 years ahead of his time on was psychic abilities. If you read the text of the first part of the Fellowship of the Ring carefully, they're literally talking about, like, you've got parts where the chapter, what is it? A Knife in the Dark. After they're at Bree, they're talking about psychic abilities. The characters are talking about feeling energy and like, oh, this place feels unsafe. And like, they're constantly talking about the heart and the intelligence of the heart and working with it. And these characters use these psychic abilities, and they're doing it consciously. Like, they're feeling energies. Like, Tolkien wouldn't describe it in those words, but there's a point, where he talks about literally, and there are senses beyond the five, you know, and like they get to Weathertop, Amun Sul, which is where they get attacked by the ring wraiths, and they can feel all of a sudden when they're in danger. And then there's a part where Fatty Bulger, who gets left at back in Buckland, is it? In the it doesn't matter. He's another hobbit who was working with them earlier, and he's left back on the east boundaries of the Shire, and they like I don't need to get into too much detail, but basically to explain this ability, to give an example of the use of this ability, these ring wraiths come up to his house, I think Crick Hollow, near Brandy Hall in Buckland, this eastern part of the Shire. It's kind of colony of the Shire. And they're coming to the house, and before they even get to the house, then they knock on it and say, "Open in the name of Mordor," and then he doesn't, so they smash the door in. But before they even get to the house, he can literally feel that he's about to be brutally murdered and killed, and he's terrified, so he just flees for his life. So that's an example of the intelligence of the heart and using the sixth sense. I mean, Tolkien was 75 years ahead of his time. People are starting to talk about how to use these abilities openly now, and he was casually talking about it in this fantasy series he wrote back then. So at least 3 generations ahead of his time. And me and my friend, this Ecuadorian friend, we had our hearts open so we could use this ability. So we knew it was certain death if we went up the mountains, so we didn't go. So symbolism here. Guys, the artillery piece was a World War I howitzer. Howitzer is a type of, artillery gun. Put a link in the description box to a Wikipedia article about what a howitzer is. I think it's a German word. So the symbolism, World War I gun in World War III. It's saying one of the reasons these guys were going to certain death is because our weapons on the Allied side in New Zealand, but by extension also the other Anglo-Saxon countries, US, Canada, Australia, US, UK, Australia, Canada, will be completely outclassed by the weapons of our enemies. Our enemies are going to have much more advanced weapon systems. That's one of the reasons we're not going to have a chance. It's going to be like the analogy I was showing. It'll be like, we're going to be using World War I kit, and we'll be going up against enemies with, weapons that were developed in 2015 and 2022. And I'm reminded of a quote. So I think it was Winston Churchill called, I think it was the French Premier or the French Prime Minister, during the invasion of France in World War II. There was this 9-month period. I think they called it I forget what they call it. It was like the phony war or something, where nothing happened, and then all of a sudden Germany invaded, and they flanked. The French had the Maginot Line was this huge area of fortifications and tunnels. They had massive guns, and it was all facing Germany. The Germans flanked them. They just went around the north through the Ardennes, through Belgium and the Low Countries, and they stormed through France. And then, it was blitzkrieg, it was lightning war. And I mean, and everyone was shocked at how quickly they defeated the French armies. And there was this, I'll find the quote and correct it in the description box if I'm wrong, but Churchill, Prime Minister of England, he called the French Prime Minister and he to kind of see what the situation was, and he was really shocked and shaken after the phone call, and he knew it was serious when he heard that all the Parisian officials in the French government, they were burning all the documents because they knew, not believed, they knew that Paris was about to be taken. And I think one of the French generals said, we're basically, said he was really depressed, and Churchill tried to kind of console him, but he was basically despairing and kind of depressed, and his mood was, extremely low, and he said something like, superiority of numbers, superiority of equipment, superiority of tactics, describing what they were dealing with in terms of how they were being defeated by the Wehrmacht, the German army, and the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force. It was just saying, you know, we were like, they had more people, they had better weapons and better tactics. You know, we're FUCKED, we're screwed. And yeah, that's what it's going to be like in this case too. That's basically what it showed. I mean, we'll be outgunned, we'll be outnumbered, and they're going to have better tactics probably as well. For them, it looks like they will as. Yeah, I mean, in the sense that they surprise us and we're not ready for it. Well, I've definitely been shown that's the case. Many others have too. So, I mean, that was one of the key messages of the dream. You need to understand if you... And that's another point. So I think it was a reference... Like, me and this other guy, we bailed, and the other 3 went up. So that's 60... So 3 out of 5 is, you know, it's 60%. 2 out of 5 is 40%. It's saying... It's saying, like, basically that it's not certain you're going to die, I think. Well, to be clear, I'm not actually quite sure. The dream was saying, if I'm honest, the dream was either saying you're either going to die for certain if you go off and fight them, in many cases, but overall, like, you know, more than well over 50% of those who choose to fight will die. We could look at it that way. So I think in some battles, everyone's going to die, but overall, yeah, it's going to be at least 60% of the people who choose to fight. You're not coming back. Yeah, to clarify, I'm not quite certain if it. Yeah, I'm not sure what it's saying. Like, not everyone who dies necessarily is going to be everyone who fights is going to die, but in many cases, in many battles, yes, like 100%, everyone's going to die. But overall, yeah, it was saying at least 50 to 60% aren't going to make it. So you need to be clear. If you choose to fight, stay and fight in our countries, just you need to be ready to die. And I've had other dreams about that, but I wouldn't be taken prisoner either. I'd go down fighting. Just kill as many as you can, and then just die on the front. Just go down fighting. Like, keep shooting until, you know, and get shot. Don't get taken prisoner. I've been shown you're going to get tortured. It's going to be horrible. Just, yeah. And there's an account of, oh, I forget what it's called. There was this little battle, this little warship. It was an American ship, and this was a battle. I forget the name of it. I'll find the link to the story and put it in the description box below. It's an amazing story, though. Basically, there was a battle in the Philippines in the latter part of the war, and this massive Japanese naval fleet came down. It included the Yamato, which was the largest battleship in the world at the time, I think. This thing was absolutely enormous, and many other large battleships. And there was only a relatively small number of American naval ships to combat them, and they sent the American admiral and the naval command sent this rather grim message to these small vessels and said, you know, you've basically got no hope, but we want you to fight. Just do what you can. Do as much damage as you can. We've got to be realistic. You're not going to win, but just go down fighting. And it's quite an inspiring story, because one of these ships, they decided, okay, we're going to die, so we're going to go down fighting. And they just went crazy. They they were firing absolutely every gun. And they ended up, this is a relatively small ship. They ended up sinking like 2 or 3 Japanese ships. Some of them were quite big. They did a lot of damage to some others. And because they knew that they were going to die, it's like, okay, we've got nothing to lose. We're just going to go completely like 1,000% hardcore, absolutely for like fighting like demons. And they did huge damage, and they actually, later it turned out the Japanese thought they were fighting like a whole bunch of really large American ships, but it was just 1 or 2, I think it was just 1 or 2 really small boats that did all this damage, and then they got destroyed in the end and they went down. And the Japanese actually saluted them as they sank, and one of the captains, I think, was of Native American descent. So, you know, that's the approach you might want to take if you're that would be the approach you should take if you decide to fight and defend our countries in World War III, if that is your path. Yeah, take as many down as you can with you, but we're going to lose. Yeah, and I wouldn't get, you know, up to you. It's your path. You know, only you know what your path is, what to do. Based on the evidence and what I've been shown, I wouldn't be taken alive. I'd just die at the front. There was a British soldier. who was interviewed, who fought in the Ukraine war, and he said he got taken prisoner by the Russians, and the torture was so horrific. He said, yeah, if I'd known what was going to happen, I would have just died on the front. Yeah, so it's something to think about as well. So another part of the symbolism of this dream from a New Zealand perspective, there was a lot of symbolism in this dream. It was very clever. So the landscape actually resembled a place called, well, it resembled the landscape at Gallipoli in the Dardanelles, which is at the entrance to the Black Sea. So people who aren't from New Zealand most likely won't know this, but it's well known in New Zealand. So New Zealand troops fought in this battle, Gallipoli, in World War I against the Turks. And I mean, it was kind of a failure. We got slaughtered. And we got slaughtered as we came into these beaches and tried to ascend these hills. And interestingly, one of the greatest successes in those battles was at a place called Chunuk Bair, and it was actually the Wellington Company that took this hill and held it. Which I guess I would be quite proud of in some way. Achievements as warriors. I mean, Wellingtonians in general are really nice people. They're quite well educated, good vibes. They're some of the best New Zealanders you'll meet from Wellington, if I'm honest. And but we ultimately lost the battle. But the symbolism in the dream, that place, Camp Bay, it looks just like Gallipoli. So that was partly the symbolism too. It was saying, it's like, in that case we were on the attack and we got destroyed and defeated. In this case we will be defending, but it'll be the same situation. We'll just get crushed basically and slaughtered. And so that was partly the symbolism of it being in Camp Bay. That landscape looks very similar to photos I've seen of Gallipoli. And the New Zealand troops, which by extension represented the troops in other Anglo-Saxon countries, Canada, UK, Australia, USA, yeah, we're gonna just get crushed basically. And then the dream ended with me and the Ecuadorian guy, and some people's role will be to fight. That's noble and honorable. We need that. But for me personally, it's just not my role. Like, I work in conservation. As I said, I may have a role to play in the war. I do definitely have skills that could be used that could actually have a really big impact, and a much higher impact than the level of simply being, an infantryman. But yeah, I'll just do as God directs me to do. But it's just not my role. So I'm not, demeaning or in any way criticizing the role of the warriors in our country who will fight to defend our countries. We totally need that. But, for me, it's just not my path. It's, everyone has their own path. And yeah, me and this Ecuadorian guy, it wasn't his path. And we knew they were all going to die too. So there was that. So we just dipped. We bailed. We got out of there and we quietly walked away. And then we went north. And then the second part of the dream, which I'll talk about in a separate video, I was shown that, for New Zealanders and other people, in the US, the UK, Australia, and Canada, those 5 countries, but other Western countries too, I was shown once again, this has been a repeating message in many of the dreams, that Ecuador will be a really good option, a really good destination to go to be safe during the war. And just to clarify, I've now been shown, based in my dreams, please refer to the disclaimer in the description box below, by the way. I'll remind you guys of that at the end of the video. But yeah, I've been shown basically the whole of the Sierra, the mountainous region, the Andes, will be pretty much safe in the war. North, central, and south. The upper parts of the Amazon basin will be safe. The lower parts, there's going to be issues when the sinking of continents happen. There's going to be an inland ocean which comes in. So there'll actually be an Atlantic coast on the east side of Ecuador. So you don't want to go too far down the Amazon lowlands. I had another dream about that. About 500 meters above sea level. Don't go any further below that. But yeah, there's not many people living out in the lowlands of the Amazon. In the east of Ecuador anyway, most of the cities are above 500 meters sea level. So, but anywhere above 500 meters sea level in the Ecuadorian Amazon is a really good option and safe. And then the coast, I'd rule out the coast for the most part. You'll want to wait. The coast in Ecuador will only be safe after the earth changes, after everything's settled down, because we're going to have asteroids, I've talked about this in other videos, slamming into the oceans, in some cases generating waves up to a mile high. That's 1,600 meters high. you know, and there'll be tsunamis hitting the coastal regions all over the planet. You want to stay away from coastal regions, but I was shown, given those caveats, you know, with the Atlantic coming in and covering much of what is now Amazon rainforest in the east of Ecuador, and enormous, you know, mega tsunamis from meteorites slamming into the Pacific and Atlantic, and in this case the Pacific Ocean. Yeah, Ecuador will be a really good option. And then I was shown some stuff about Ecuador having actually a really good future because of the fact that its people are basically godly and virtuous at a level that's quite exceptional globally. And that was my experience, that, man, the people are like, they're just amazing. They're so sweet. They're so civilized. Gosh. Our countries, you can really see how far they've fallen when you compare them to Ecuadorians. And most of them, they're not perfect. They aren't. Like, I met Ecuadorian psychopaths, but like, honestly, like the Ecuadorian psychopaths I met, they were like a normal New Zealander having a bad day. I'm serious. Like, they're just really peaceful, virtuous people for the most part. I'm not exaggerating. And so sweet and friendly and kind. It was mind-blowing. And like, I'm talking everyone, like even, you know, like the peasants, literally peasants, campesinos. I'd met some and they'd almost be glowing. They were smiling with so much love. It was just, so Ecuador is a very, very godly country full of very virtuous, kind people. And they're going to reap what they've sown, and they're going to get a really, really big payoff. Literally. I'll get into that in that later video. I got shown it was stuff to do with their economy, how it's going to absolutely surge. But that's, yeah, a topic for the next part of the video. So I mean, that's kind of a hopeful note to end on, given that the topic of this one's somewhat grim. I've been shown, you know, expect to die if you fight defending our countries. You know, you might not, but in many cases, yeah, to clarify, everyone's going to die in some battles. And yeah, as I said, it's better to don't get taken prisoner. Go down fighting. Kill an extra 3 or 4 of them, then get shot. Don't get taken prisoner because they'll torture you, and it's better to just get shot quickly and die quickly on the battlefield. Yeah, some cases, a lot of these battles, everyone's going to die. But overall, I got shown, yeah, at least most places, at least 50 or 60% of the troops are going to die. So yeah, just be aware of that. And then, you know, but the positive side is, if you don't want to fight, or you have family members who don't want to fight, they can go to countries where they'll be really safe, where there's a really good future, like Ecuador. You know, I've been shown other options, Chile, Argentina. Other people have had dreams about South Africa. Don't forget, in the end, we win the war too. So, you know, it's very grim, and we'll be under occupation for many years, but it won't last. We'll win in the end. So yeah, I hope this video has been of value to you. I believe that dream is from God. I believe it was prophetic. Please refer to the disclaimer in the description box below if you've not already done so. Yeah, and think about, you know, the stuff that Tolkien wrote about. If you really read it slowly and read between the lines in many cases, in the first parts of the Fellowship of the Ring and other parts of that book, not with regards to the feminist stuff, although that is interesting, but about using your sixth sense, the intelligence of the heart. He's constantly talking about, you know, words like honor and blah, 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 all these kind of, the main characters are all quite virtuous, but they're literally using psychic abilities in situations of danger to keep themselves safe, and also to be more effective warriors, like, you know, and to fight, like to know when to strike, to know when to run, and know when to strike, know when to fight. That's going to help you in your life in general, and it will certainly, for anyone who chooses to fight in the war, it's going to help you a lot. So, and I'll be honest, that's an edge that our soldiers will have over those of many of these countries that are coming to attack us, because in many cases, not all, because a lot of the Russians are Christians, they've got open hearts, a lot of them. It's a paradox though, because they're insanely brutal in warfare. But I mean, the Chinese, I mean, China's really dark right now. I mean, they're godless, they're under the CCP. I just saw a YouTube video about how, in many cases, like, they're using water that they use in toilets, like it's dirty. They're using it for cooking in many restaurants, and it's like so bad, because they got rid of all their spiritual values. I mean, they used to have Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism, and they got rid of that in the Cultural Revolution. So there's no Christian or moral values there. Like in China, this is saying, if you can cheat, cheat. And then the attitude there is, if you pay for something cheap, and get ripped off, it's your fault, because you should be able to, you should have the money to be rich. You should, like, that's just expected. And like, if you're rich and you can pay for quality stuff, then you get quality stuff. But if you're paying for stuff that's cheap, yeah, everyone's ripping each other off. Like, it's a really immoral society, and super, super dark. So, I mean, for sure, most Chinese aren't going to have these advantages and these abilities. A lot of the Russians, not all of them will, because they'll have open hearts. But, you know, for many of our soldiers who have open hearts, these psychic abilities, the sixth sense is really, you know, like I said, having an open heart, it's not just about peace and love. It's also about, you know, the Zen indigo warrior Jedi, the divine masculine, which we need. You know, part of having an open heart, it's not all about peace and love. It's about righteous fury and, you know, using these senses to be a better warrior. But it'll also, as I said, if you keep your heart open, it keeps empathy turned on, but know when to switch compassion off, because you can't be compassionate when you have to, you know, shoot someone in the head. But it'll make you a more effective warrior. Yeah. And it'll stop you turning into a psychopath, but it will keep you calm and level-headed and thinking clearly, stop you getting lost in your emotions. But then, so it will help you in many ways, but then it will also stop you from turning into a complete demon and going, you know, doing war crimes and things, which will then, countries that do that generate terrible karma, and you generate really bad karma for yourself. And, you know, that's not a good thing either. So, yeah, the intelligence of the heart is often misunderstood. It's not, yeah. And we need the divine masculine. So that was kind of an important theme of the stream. And that's, to be honest, that's important information. Those are important skills for anyone to develop moving into this period in the next 20 or 30 years. Developing your sixth sense. It's going to help you to care for people, to be a more loving and kind person. That's the divine feminine, not female, because both men and women need both, the feminine and the masculine. Although obviously women tend to lean mostly towards feminine, most of them, and more men, most of us tend to lean towards the masculine. But then we also need, you know, the divine masculine, which is action and adventure, and the warrior archetype, and the ability to be dangerous and fight when you need to, but not to be aggressive, only to defend in such situations where you have not provoked an attack and where you don't deserve it. So think about the intelligence of the heart and how to use it. Yeah, Tolkien, as I said, was 75 years ahead of his time, but many people today still haven't got that. Still don't know how to work that stuff, and it's going to be a huge edge. And if you choose to fight in this war or not, it's going to help you make it through the Earth Changes period, you and your family. So I hope that video has been of some value, and yeah, I'll catch you in the next one. Thank you.